You're so professional.
I try. I try very hard. All right. Hello, and welcome once again to another episode of the Sad Boys Book Club. I am your host, the Champion of Light.
And I'm Dusty.
The Herald of Darkness. And we are on episode number 2 of Caliban's War.
Yes. Daniel, how you feeling about Caliban's War so far?
You know, I'm liking it. I think I like that first bit a little bit more because I don't know. I just liked it. This is a conceit that you see a lot in writing. It's especially in the last probably 20 years, it's become a kind of fashionable writing advice to really, especially in genre fiction like this, to kind of front load your book with some like good juicy part to really, because and it makes a certain amount of sense when somebody is reading the book. They, if it doesn't grab them, they're very like to put it down or not buy the book. So you want the first chunk of the book to be really to really grab people. That's not to say this part is bad. It's just for whatever reason just not hooking me like that first part did. But it does end in a very, very interesting place.
Yeah, it's the momentum wave, so to say. You've got you got to start strong, and then you gotta because a roller coaster has ups and downs. If a roller coaster was just peaks, then it would be boring. So you have to have that give and take. And I think that this book's done a great job with its pacing so far to give us a really nice bombastic start to really set the tone, set the pace of the book. And now this second quarter of the books has been a bit of a slowdown to just kind of, I guess, give us a little bit of a breath before we jump into what will probably be what leads to the climax of the book. So yeah, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, and I don't think that's what you were going for with it. But yeah, it's definitely a slower section of the book outside of the very end of what we're covering. But I'm fine with it. A lot of really great character writing once again. I can't complain about that. That's what I live for.
Yeah, there's some interesting developments that I'm sure we'll get into regarding the Holden-Naomi relationship. A little more, some developments with Amos, who I'm starting to appreciate, like the, how you were saying, I think it was last time around, where you mentioned that Amos had become kind of a fan favorite of sorts among both the book readers and show watchers and people who are both. Yeah, he's a character that's definitely grown on me the most. And also, I guess we finally have some Alex moments. Other than being like, "Hi, I'm Alex." Yeah, at the very beginning.
I'm the pilot. I fly. Y'all.
Hey, y'all. I'm just a little pilot from Mars. That's basically his characterization heretofore.
I feel like, with the exception of Holden and Prax's storyline, I feel like I can kind of sum up this quarter in only kind of a couple of seconds. I guess, really, I should say, I feel like I could really sum up Avasarala and Bobby's storyline in just a couple of sentences, because it's a lot of politicking. Yeah, like there's a lot more of just them kind of reacting to the situation than them like being proactive towards the situation, and it's kind of, I think that's gonna be kind of starting to turn a corner once we start once we start hitting the second half of the book here.
Sure. But, and I think not again. I keep feeling like I'm sounding negative, but I really don't mean it this way. But like things like that, where the characters are not proactive, that can sometimes lead to a little bit of a slog. Is like when the agency is not being driven of the story is not being driven by the character,
Yeah, and I think what makes this like fine in this regard, and still, in my opinion, very entertaining, is that while I feel like that's kind of true right now for Avasarala and Bobby, that is not true at all for Holden and Prax.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why, one of the things why a multiple point of view book can be helpful is so that sometimes, there's never like long passages of, I guess, passivity in the point of view characters. Is you can kind of, you can kind of spread it around for like, for these things to happen. It could also cause issues, and we haven't had any yet that I am aware of, certainly, that where one character's actions can kind of lead to another character kind of being, I don't know how to put it, disempowered, perhaps, where it can kind of like one will like derail the other. And I think that's one of the things that this book has avoided, is it's kind of like everything feels really good. It feels solid. It's like if you've ever built something and you get the nice base layer, and then you put another couple layers up, and everything still feels just as solid as it did at the beginning. That's kind of the feeling I'm getting vis-a-vis the plot in this book.
Yeah,
at this point.
Yeah. And if you want to expand on anything, please go ahead. But just for sake of just kind of getting that kind of like bullet point list down for, at the very least, Avasarala and Bobby's storyline at this point in the story. Basically, it's they meet up to have their meeting, the joint meeting between the UN and Mars about kind of what to do about this war, and it's very bureaucratic, very just kind of what can we do to help our own careers and not necessarily the people that are suffering from this war. And Bobby doesn't like that. She kind of takes a stand, and as she puts it, when are we going to talk about the fucking monster? And that pisses Thorson off, and he basically pulls the plug on her. But Avasarala is impressed by her, grabs her, and is like, hey, I want you to be a part of my team, because I'm like you in wanting to figure out who caused this and want to stop them. I don't care about this bureaucratic nonsense. I just want peace. So she starts working for her, but the Cold War that turned into kind of a hot war that's now kind of in a ceasefire once again turns very hot once again, because basically one of the guys on the UN is a war hawk, and despite the fact
Admiral Wynn.
Yeah. Despite the fact that Avasarala did everything in her power to completely negate his attempt at escalation, he somehow found a way to override her. He was able to unsabotage Avasarala's sabotaging of his attempt to escalate the war, and that's caused it to go even hotter than it was before, ruining the peace talks. And now Bobby is ostensibly, in the moment, trapped on Earth, being a liaison for Avasarala and having to convince herself she's not a traitor to Mars, which, for the record, I don't think she is. I think that's pretty fair to say. And meanwhile, she's dealing with the kind of politicking and backroom nonsense that's going on here, including having just found out that Soren, who is Avasarala's assistant, is doing things behind her back. And that's really kind of the entire section for them, I feel. Unless you want to expand on anything in particular. That's just the kind of broad stroke of it, of the whole thing.
No, nothing. Nothing really. I just one very small thought is I hope we didn't, I hope we didn't leave listeners with the impression that we were anti Avasarala at in any way. This section actually made her actually in many ways quite likable as a figure, and I don't know. I really wish there was an Avasarala in the world today, actually.
I mean, I did say last time that she was my favorite of the new perspective characters.
Oh, well, I forgot that. I just wanted to make clear my perspective where I was a little bit nonplussed with some of the way that they wrote her, but the character itself, at least at first, the character is really good, and I quite enjoy her.
Yeah, I would say her and Bobby are definitely the strongest new characters introduced in the book so far. I think Prax is. I would say he's fine, but I really don't. I think the biggest thing that's keeping me like really engaged with his story is the fact that he is with Holden and the crew, and his story is basically being carried with Holden and the crew. So I think that's why, for me, Prax is just fine and not because I feel like if he was doing his own kind of thing on his own, I'd probably be a little bored of his character and what he's doing. But I think he meshes with the crew well enough to kind of offset any flaws I feel like he has as a perspective character.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's kind of, it's one of those things where, kind of like we were just saying, it's the agency versus not thing yet again. He's just kind of, not entirely. He has his moments that I'm sure that we'll get to, but he is mostly just kind of an observer, and I don't want to say helpless per se, but he is very dependent on Holden and the crew at this point.
Yeah, but yeah, I do feel like we're might be kind of skimming really badly on Avasarala and Bobby, but I really just don't have much else to kind of say at this point other than like it's just kind of the more political side of the war so far, and I guess there's like a little bit more of an escalation with Venus and Avasarala. She was taken off of the peace talks. In order to be able to focus purely on Venus, which she thought was a win, but it turned out actually she was being played against, and that's one of the reasons that allowed the massive UN force to lead an offensive against the Martians to kind of restart the war. So she did kind of get played a little bit, and it's looking like she's getting played a lot, especially based on what it looks like Soren's been doing, possibly behind her back. So she definitely
that was kind of an interesting kind of twist on the character, and I know we're trying to move on, but I'll make this pretty brief. But I thought that Soren was kind of he seemed like a very bland and sort of like stock Senate page type character where he just like does all the things, and that the character that is involved in the plot asks of him, and he gives like a little snarky remark here and there, but like generally kind of a nothing character, maybe more of a plot device rather than an actual character. But I don't know. It is interesting to see him kind of like to raise the questions of his loyalties here.
yeah. So I definitely think that this section was a way to kind of tell us that Avasarala is not as clever and not as resourceful as she thought she was, and how we were presented to her as being, and that's kind of causing some issues on her end of the story that are gonna she's gonna have to deal with and try and navigate around. But she's got Bobby for whatever that's worth.
I would say also it's maybe not that she's not as clever as we thought. It's just that she is dealing with a very large bureaucracy that has its own agents within the bureaucracy that have their own agendas, and that she is not. So it's not going to be that she's just going to just through sheer force of personality or intellect or whatever just be able to steamroll her way to stopping the war or anything. There are stakeholders within the UN and probably out without the UN outside of it that are trying to push for this to happen, and it creates it makes it more interesting, I guess, for there to be sort of stakes, and for it not to just be a thing where she just basically just walks it to completion. There's going to be some adversity to overcome, some backbiting and all that.
Yeah, which something I did really like was it was at the end of one of the chapters when she's talking to Bobby, and she's basically giving her a thought experiment about that's kind of a very thin analogy of the situation, and she's like being like, hey, given these situations and what each side is doing, how do you see this eventually playing out? And Bobby's like, it looks like we're basically both playing to win in the short term but lose in the long term. So it's going to be, us working towards losing later, and Officer L is like, all right, then let's work towards stopping us both from playing to lose. So I'm paraphrasing it really badly, but I thought that was a really good interaction and a great moment for both characters.
Yeah, it definitely was. It's interesting because I think Bobby is pretty well written. She's very. She is both very much kind of like with that archetypical kind of grunt character, so to say, but she also is very she's also quite savvy as well, in her own way. So I don't know. I like where this is all going. It just doesn't necessarily make for great radio, so to say, to recap all the boardroom meetings.
Yeah. Like I said, a lot of politicking, a lot of bureaucratic nonsense going on, and for someone like me, I'm totally fine with things like this being in fiction as long as it's done well, and I think this is a case of it being done well. So I'm having a good time with it. I'm like, yeah, sure, cool, whatever. And it being interspersed with Prax and Holden's story being the more kind of exciting one, for lack of a better term, is making it a very fun read.
Yes.
But moving on to Prax and Holden, we left them in a very very interesting situation last time. They were about to head into the tunnels that they had seen. What was the doctor's name? Strickland, right?
That sounds right, but for some reason I can't remember his name, but I think that's what it was.
Yeah, him taking May into those tunnels, and we left them with their new crew of Martian mercenaries getting ready to go into the tunnels to find them. And we get a nice little bit of kind of tension building as they're working their way through the tunnels. Holden has this plan to make sure that their exits are covered, that they're not really like splitting up, but they're leaving scouts behind to make sure that they'll never have to worry about people being surprised, basically. And they're working their way room to room, hallway to hallway, and they eventually find a room where it looks like there was activity in the past, and they find the body of a kid that we didn't really go over this, but there was a person that Prax went to visit while he was looking for May before he found Holden and the crew, and he was like talking to him, and they were like really close friends, like basically family, and the other dude's son was one of the kids that was missing. I think his name was like Katoa is the name of the kid. But him and his family had basically just assumed him dead and were getting ready to get off of Ganymede because they saw the writing on the wall for the situation. And that kind of led to a fight between him and Prax. Well, we found Katoa and he's dead. So, yay.
Yeah, that was pretty dark, that section.
Yeah, which I'm kind of curious as to what these kids are being used for, because as far as I'm aware, we've only seen one kid, just Katoa. It's Katoa, right? Or like Kakoa? I don't remember. I guess it's not incredibly important, but I'm kind of curious as to what's going on with these kids. But they realize that the next room it's a little warmer than the one that they're in, which means that there's either people still in there or people have just recently vacated it, because the station is getting colder and colder because the ecosystem is failing. Mm-hmm. And we have this great little moment that just kind of shows why Prax is questionable at times, because Holden has this plan for him and Amos, and the Martians to just kind of tactically get into the room and prepare for any potential threats in there. And while Holden's planning it, they're just like, wait, where's the doctor? And he's just walking through the door right into the room. And they have to follow in after him. And there are people in there just chilling and munching on some nice, delicious asteroid pizza. And we get this great scene where it's like, things aren't like they are in the movies, where Holden's trying to defuse the situation, and Prax is just overriding him, being like, where's my daughter, and Holden thinks that he's going to be able to get it to be just them talking until Prax just cocks his pistol, And I love how like that's like the end of the chapter. It's a Holden chapter, and he's like, "Ah, son of a bitch," and he's aware that the firefight's now going to start. And at the start of the Prax chapter, he's just like he's sitting there thinking, he's like, "This is, in the movies you bring back the hammer to show that you're being serious, that you're not to be messed with, that I want what I want, and this is what it's going to get people to start talking." What he didn't expect was that to be ostensibly telling the people that he's holding the gun to, "I'm about to shoot you, you better start shooting back." And I love that kind of I don't want to say that it's like it's bucking a cliche or a trope or anything like that, because I don't know if that's actually, I don't know if that classifies as a trope, the whole like, tell me what I want to know, cocks the pistol. I mean, it probably
I think it does. I think like it happens in movies and stuff, like the click, the pulling back the hammer, the pumping the shotgun, that kind of stuff. I think we knew what it was commenting on, and that's probably something that the partnership known as James Corey probably has noticed in books and in film and TV. That's kind of irked them, and I think they're commenting on that.
Yeah. Gotta love the classic, "Oh, nice, a shotgun. Let me quickly just eject a live round for no reason."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it must be something like that. But it is fairly a fairly tragic moment, because it did seem like the guards that they had encountered were willing to surrender, more or less, because they were. There was this moment that I remember very clearly, and unfortunately I don't have the book with me at the moment, that it mentioned that the leader of the group of guards that they had essentially cornered, being showing relief that it looked like they were going to be able to get out of this without fighting. So it is very it is very unfortunate that this all ended the way it did.
Yeah,
but it does kind of show like it reflects on the characters in a number of ways. So one, we kind of get the moment of Holden getting a classic Holden moment, not Miller Holden, as he has kind of put it at this, and others have put it. It's Holden trying to minimize violence and try to talk his way out of something. So that is kind of a moment that shows you that that character change is something that's still very in flux. It shows it gives this moment of not too negatively. I don't mean this like too negatively on Amos, because again, he's a very likable character. But it does show that maybe there was a lapse in judgment here, in maybe bringing Prax into this mission the way he did and giving him a weapon. And also it shows kind of the inexperience and naivete of Prax.
Yeah. I do think one of the reasons why the group in there were willing to possibly just kind of let Holden play his game is because they were aware that they had more. They weren't the only, for lack of a better term, we'll just say hostiles in this area. And she even said as much, that we got plenty of more guards in the other room. All I got to do is basically just alert them. So I'm pretty sure she thought, okay, if this guy is not going to be trigger happy, then I ain't too concerned that we'll be able to ostensibly play them until backup comes, and then we'll deal with that there. But yeah, Prax ruined the situation, and a shootout ensues, and thankfully the nameless Martians are the only casualties.
Yeah, it is a shame though. I really, in a very strange way, I was really hoping for them to get off the station, or at least most of them too.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, slight spoilers here, they only lose like 2 of them. There's like 7 or 6. There's 6 of them, and I think they only lose like 2, which all things considered.
I thought it was like there were 6 and they lost like 3 or 4. But you're probably right.
2 were killed and 1 was shot in the stomach, but was saved by something we'll get to. So now we get to nice action fun scene as they're just moving down the corridors, taking out guys, and we get fun gunfight Holden and Amos as they're just kicking ass. A lot of death, but not all of it is caused by them. Something else. There's a third party fighting here, and they're starting to kind of realize that as they go and go. And eventually, they get to the end of the area, and they hear on the other side of a door what sounds like a ship taking off. And whether or not May is alive, there's a good chance that she's not going to be on Ganymede anymore because they've missed being able to stop whatever ship is leaving. So now it's up to them to try and get off of Ganymede. I'm going to quickly throw this in because I forgot about it until just now. But as we kind of alluded to briefly in the previous part, Avasarala was aware of Holden and the crew being on Ganymede because of Holden's slick beard disguise not being quite as slick as he thought it was. And as soon as she learns that they've gone into the tunnels and started a firefight and things are kind of getting out of hand on Ganymede, she's like, okay, well, they have something to do with the protomolecule and Venus being on Ganymede. So that's something we'll kind of get to. So she's like, Fred Johnson's making a play, so we need to grab them. We need to apprehend Holden and the crew. So that's something that she kind of did at that point in time, and she sends that order on. And there's like a 40-minute delay between her sending it and the guy that will receive it. Mm-hmm. So that's just kind of something to keep in mind. So they escape out, but in the meantime, as they're going back the way they came, Amos finds a sample of the protomolecule in one of the rooms that they were coming back through. And I love this. This is great. So Holden clearly has some PTSD from the protomolecule, and it really shows through here. And I love this sign of weakness from Holden. I love that he's not just this flawless, never shaken, indomitable action hero that will always lead his crew to victory through grace under pressure, yada yada yada. I love this sign of weakness in him. It's just, I think it's a great character moment for him because it shows that he still feels the mental and emotional scars from Eros, and seeing all of this possibly getting ready to repeat itself is just, it's triggering him, for lack of a better term. And I love it. I think that's just a great character moment.
Yeah, it definitely it definitely adds a little realism to this, and it gives I think this idea of flawed protagonists in the sense of like them dealing with emotional issues and traumatic incidents has become more common as in the last decade or so. But I think this is definitely like in the vanguard of that. So I think it is interesting in that way.
Yeah.
At least within genre fiction. I mean, obviously, books have been written since the dawn of time about trauma and how that is affected. But you know what I mean, like in terms of books aimed at mass popularity, and in terms of like sci-fi stuff, it does a good job of introducing these concepts.
Yeah. I mean, you see it a lot with things like younger main characters in like high fantasy, but yeah, I feel like in a lot of things you want your calm and cool super action hero. You're John Wick's, which is not to say that John Wick is this like ultimate badass with no emotion. I mean, the whole point of the first movie is him. I wouldn't say overreacting, but maybe it is a minor overreaction, the killing spree he goes on because of an animal being killed. I would say I'm going to go on record saying that he was justified and did nothing wrong. But when you kind of pull back to a global scale, that's a very, very heavy emotional reaction. But I think it's more what the dog meant than the dog itself. We're not talking about John Wick. My point being is John Wick is a character that you see as this kind of like ultimate badass, can't be stopped, maybe slowed down a little, but will get back up and kick your teeth in and kill you with a pencil and a book, so it's just kind of one of those things that it's nice to see these characters have very clear, realistic flaws and have to deal with those flaws and have to overcome the the situation and try to like kind of move past that trauma in order to do what is best for not only themselves but for the people around them. And I think this is a really great section for Holden's character development even more because he's not John Wick.
Absolutely.
But anyways, they make it out, and Holden wants Alex to bring the Rosie to the landing pad where they have the Somnambulist, the ship that they came in on, and he's gonna give the Martians the Somnambulist. He's like, here you go, here's your payment, get off the rock, thanks for the help. But as they make it back to the ship, they get ambushed by what we learn is what we should have figured out by this point is the UN getting ready to take them in, and we have an Amos death fake out that lasts for all of about 1 page, but all the same
they did the J.J. Abrams.
I was expecting you to say they did the Chewbacca in Rise of Skywalker. That's exactly where.
Well, that's what I'm alluding to.
I'm gonna say that's not quite fair because it's not like it was like, oh hey, he's dead, and then like half an hour later it's like, oh, by the way, he's not actually dead. It was, it was one of those things.
Well, this was similar to the C-3PO quote unquote death, right? It was like C-3PO was like, oh yes, I will sacrifice myself for my friends, and then he like learned to speak evil Sith language or whatever, and then after he was done, and it was like supposed to like erase his mind or whatever, and then he's like, oh dearie me, that was quite dreadful. Anyway, I'm back to normal.
Yeah. It's a good thing R2-D2 had a backup of my memory on hand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't think it's really fair, personally, to use those really terrible Star Wars examples for this, because I mean, death fake outs they're not uncommon, and this one I feel it at least has a nice kind of it doesn't feel as cheap as like the Chewbacca or R2 or C-3PO ones in Rise of Skywalker, because it's we're seeing it from Holden's perspective, and as far as Holden is concerned, he watches Amos get killed. Because what happens is they're trying to gun down the soldiers trying to apprehend them, and Amos gets shot in the leg, and he sees Amos, a soldier walk up behind Amos, shoot him in the back of the head, and him fall forward into a puddle of blood. Which we learn that it's a non-lethal round. But I'm sitting here thinking like, man, these non-lethal rounds in the future must be like really non-lethal if you can basically point blank someone in the back of the head and all they get is a little welt from it. Because I feel like if you had a beanbag gun, if you walked up right behind somebody, put the gun against their head and pulled the trigger, you're still killing them.
Well, didn't that happen to like a guy on the set of The Crow or something like that? It wasn't even like a non-lethal or quote unquote non-lethal round, but it was like just a blank, like up against his head. I don't know. That part did not necessarily ring true to me, I guess. So, but mostly because it is a firearm. If it was like some sort of stun weapon, it would be like, oh, okay. But not that. That's a my gripes with the whole Amos death fake out are relatively minor within within the scale of the entire book.
Yeah, you're thinking of Brandon Lee, by the way.
Oh yes. That I thought I couldn't quite remember his name at the moment, so I was kind of dancing around it. But thank you for reminding that is who I'm talking about.
Yeah, but like the blood was him falling on his nose and breaking his nose, so that's what that was. But I don't know if this next scene is a comment towards the sheer competence and just pure badassery that is Holden and the crew, or it's a comment on the pure ineptitude of the UN, because they get captured, their wrists and ankles are tied, and they're being held, and the UN people are like, all right, we got them, mission accomplished. But because of the formerly cold now hot kind of cooling off war now getting very hot once again, the entire station is being bombarded completely from orbit, and so it's the whole place is getting destroyed, and so the UN guys are just like, well, we can't transport them without having them transport themselves, so cut their ankle ties. And as soon as their ankles are cut, Holden and Amos just completely wreck everybody. Just take them all out, get their weapons, get their armor back, and they're like, all right. They tie them up, and they're like, later, dudes, and they just leave. They give the Holden make sure that the Martian people, Wendell, I think is the name of the guy leading that Martian company, make sure that he still has the keys to the ship, and he's like, all right, man, thanks for the help, see you later. And he's like, yep, I hope to never have to deal with you again. And Holden's like, fair enough, see you later. I love it. Like, such a great little scene that just I don't know, it was really funny to me.
Yeah.
So now they need to make their way back to the Roci, and it turns out that the way to the original plan's not going to work, so they got to figure out another place. And Prax is like, well, hey, how about the landing pad that we heard the ship go off of when we were going through the tunnels? And they're like, well, that's the best idea we have. And they have to kind of navigate through it. They have to do a little bit of a spacewalk to finally make it to the Rocinante. But they make it back. It's, you know. I don't know. Do you think that the Martians made it off?
I thought it was implied that they did not.
Yeah.
Like I thought it was implied that the ship got blown up at some point during the fray.
Well, what happened? So Naomi says that she can't get in contact with Alex anymore because she was routing her comms through the Somnambulist, which means that they either took off and left, or they got blown up. It's just kind of one or the other, and we don't really know. And they're just like, it's possible that they probably died, but I don't know. I could kind of really see it going either way.
I mean, I hope they lived, but I kind of shared the same sort of pessimistic evaluation of the scenario that it's. I think they probably died, but it would make for a nice, especially when they kind of lampshaded it with the whole, well, I hope I never see you again kind of situation. Like they kind of that might have been seen as like what is it, foreshadowing of sorts.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I guess I don't share I do share the negative assumption on what happened to them.
Yeah, it kind of you mentioning it like this, it kind of reminds me of in Baby Driver, after the first heist, when John Bernthal's character's like, if you don't see me again, it means I'm dead, and you don't see him again for the rest of the movie.
Oh yeah.
But anyway, so they make it in to the Roci. There's a nice, fun little action escape to get them out of Ganymede. They have to dodge some missiles, some fun flying, and just another fun action chase scene. But it's not over yet, as they're heading back to Tycho, and Holden thinks, he's convinced, he's 100% cannot be swayed, that Fred did this. He's supposed to have the only sample of the protomolecule, yet it's on Ganymede. This is Fred's doing. Do you think this is Fred's doing?
I was going to ask, actually, because I don't really understand why he thinks it is Fred's doing. Like that seemed to come out of left field for me.
Because he's convinced that the only sample in existence is with Fred because of Leviathan Wakes.
Yeah, I kind of remember that, but I'm just like, maybe this is my own bias because I ended I remember ending that book and coming away with liking Fred maybe more than any other character. So maybe I am biased, but I was like, oh yeah, no, there's no way he could do that. He was like the if we are to take the conceit that Holden in the first book was moral, he was like the only other moral character.
Yeah. I think it's pretty ignorant personally to think that you had the sole sample. Like, I mean, it very well could be Fred. Fred could be doing this, and it could be a nice little heel turn coming in. But like, I just to give Fred a little bit of the benefit of the doubt right now, I think that Holden thinking that he had the only sample, period, and that they for sure got rid of every other one, is just really naive, to say the least. This is old Holden popping up again.
I have a couple of thoughts here. One, I completely agree with what you're saying, but two, there are definitely several situations where there was theoretical leftover proto molecule, like Julie Mao's apartment. Remember that as far that was never like they never resolved whether that was like cleaned or what happened with all that. So I could very easily see. It is very conceivable that somebody on that police department that was on the scene that they could have like spirited away a sample to some sort of nefarious actor.
Yeah, because there was enough time between them finding her body and the Arrow Station meltdown happening that something could have happened.
Yeah, and at the lab during the lab mission, like. Obviously they could have had they had some of it there because they were like testing it and all that. But like, is that really like the only place they were testing? Or it would be surprising if they didn't like have other like samples of it somewhere else, or at least it would be surprising to me. So to me, it just seems a little bit either naive or self-aggrandizing. I'm choosing to believe naive. But like it's the sort of like self-aggrandizing guilt to be like, oh, it's my fault. I didn't destroy all the sample and I gave it to him. So, it's just like a proxy of his own sort of guilt and his own culpability kind of situation there. But I also do recall that we mentioned that the potential of like a Fred heel turn in future installments, but I just don't think that. I don't know. I just don't see it. I think it's going to lead to a major moment where Holden kind of falls on his face and experiences some sort of embarrassment. But I would be very surprised and honestly a little disappointed if it is in fact Fred that was behind this.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm willing to give Fred the benefit of the doubt right now, personally, but we'll see what happens. But now, like, I guess the kind of last little section here. So as they're like heading out, getting ready to go, they realize that the air pressure in the cargo hold they realized before that it's been bad, but they realize why. They find out why. And it's that there's something inside the cargo hold, and it looks like a creature affected by the proto-molecule has infiltrated the ship, and now they have to deal with it.
This was very much shades of the end of Alien.
Yeah. So now Amos and Holden have to go and deal with that, and man, is this what you're kind of talking about with your little bit of Alex?
Yeah. Well, this is really the only time where Alex has had prolonged anything really to do with the plot, but especially dialogue to this point in the book.
Yeah, Holden Holden tells Alex that, hey, if the worst comes to worst, you gotta blow the ship up. Sorry, them's the breaks. uh, and he kind of has to fight with Alex a little bit, but he's like, all right, yeah, okay.
Well, it's one of those things where Alex, he's just, and this is true of like people that are like pilots and stuff. The ship, they become to identify it almost as like a part of them, as like a friend almost. So it creates this awkward tension where Alex is like, well, maybe we should blow it up, but he's not quite willing to get there mentally. It's just that I don't want to quite say love of it, but it is a kind of love, for the ship.
Yeah. Which it might be worth mentioning here as well. Kind of glazed past this, but a little bit of relationship strife going on between Holden and Naomi, because she's not fond of the man that he's turning into.
Which is unfortunate because he was finally taking steps to like go back to the original Holden, and is also going back to the original Holden in the bad way. She does kind of serve him an ultimatum here, after a sequence where they are. It's basically like, you need to go back to the way you were, or the relationship doesn't have a future.
Yeah. Anyways, Holden and Amos go down, and they have a fight with this creature, and it goes very poorly for them. And Holden gets pinned, got a busted up knee. Hopefully.
Sorry, I apologize for interrupting, but there is another moment that I kind of wanted to highlight. That before Holden and Amos are going into the area where the creature is, that's been kind of infiltrated by the creature, but also that it's like there's like a rupture that they're having to go into, and they're suiting up for it, and they're getting ready to go into this depressurized area, and they have this little conversation, and Holden is obviously he's having a hard time dealing with obviously it's a very difficult situation to be the leader in a scenario where people could die, and he's telling Amos, he's like, promise me that you're going to survive this, and Amos has this great quote of like, Captain, if I die, it's because everybody else is already dead.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's kind of a banger line.
Yeah, I was built to be the last man standing or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a really cool line. Amos has got some real memorable lines in this one.
Yeah. It was such a bar. I was willing to forgive the death fake out after that. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, that was a fun one for sure.
And it was a nice way to build their relationship and build Amos. I know we said this last time, but I need to reiterate. I really like how they're building Amos as a character. Like last book, he wasn't bad by any means, but he was kind of like a guy in the background that's like, whatever you say, boss. Now he's kind of like rounding into a distinct and appreciable character, and I don't know, I like him.
Yeah. So they're fighting this monster, and it really kind of gets the better of them. But the interesting thing is, it's not really like going for the kill. It's just kind of like keeping them back. That's at least what it seems like. And yeah, Holden gets pinned. He's injured. His leg is his knee's messed up under the. He's like pinned between a container and the cargo bay. And they're trying to figure out like what best to do. And Prax figures out that the thing is, it's trying to radiate itself, and it's trying to kind of like dig through the hole to get to the radiator, the reactor of the ship, so it can suck up that good old nutritious radiation. And they come up with a plan to essentially bait it with a bigger source of radiation to get it off the ship, and that's how they're going to hopefully deal with it. And so Prax has to do a little bit of a minor spacewalk and just kind of chuck this tinfoil wrapped radiation bait out into space and hope that the monster takes it. And it ends up it does take the bait, and it just leaps out, and he's like, neat. And they all get to a safe thing. Amos is able to get Holden free, but they they notice that it's left behind an incendiary grenade as it jumped out, and I'm just thinking like what?
Yeah, that I was trying to. I had to read a couple times trying to am I missing something?
Yeah, the creature's just like, you know what? Hey, I know what you're doing, but I'm gonna play with it anyways. Here's a grenade to go.
Which is a very strange thing, and kind of leads to something that I want to get to really quickly. I'm going to do a little bit of a theory crafting here. Okay, so they do mention when they were talking about this creature that it is not as different or as mutated as previous victims of the protomolecule have been, and that they I think Prax, when he's doing his research about this and getting the radiation bait thing together, he comes to the conclusion that this iteration of the protomolecule has been tampered with in some way. I think that's, and because the formation of the human is more recognizably human rather than more monstrous.
Yeah, which is something that we saw with the monster at the start as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess when they brought that back up, and with the unfortunate the dead child and all of that, I think that's kind of what's going on, and I think I fear that the end. I don't think this is going to happen, but there is a chance that they find May, and May is going to have been mutated into this creature, but using this sort of modified version of the protomolecule. But I think that the monsters that we're going to be seeing, with the exception of the one that we saw at the beginning of the book, are going to be like the captured children from the beginning that have been mutated.
Yeah. But and so we end this section with the crew taking off to try and burn up the protomolecule creature with their afterburners, and I'm assuming the grenade detonating, and Prax is knocked unconscious, and that's where we leave the crew, and where we end this section this week.
Yeah, it was, it wasn't bad, certainly, but I definitely prefer the first bit. But I really am very interested to see where this goes, and I think that saving the protomolecule for later in Leviathan Wakes was certainly the right call. But I think it's interesting to see how it's going to play in this book now that it is, present from the beginning, and see how that sort of affects the contours of the story and of the way that it's being told.
Yeah. Yeah. So I do agree that at least it's a bit of a down quarter, because like we said at the beginning, you gotta have that hook, and then you gotta kind of decompress, and then we're gonna start ramping up to the next bit here. But I really like what's building with Avasarala and Bobby on that end, and I like the mysteries that we're kind of seeing get played in real time with Holden and Prax. So I'm really excited for this next quarter of the book.
Yep, definitely.
Yeah, anything else you want to talk about before we wrap up here?
No, the little theory thing was the really the only thing that I had, other than what we already discussed.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that about wraps us for this. Daniel, we did it, man. We made a real short episode here. We were nice and tight and precise, and we didn't meander too much.
Finally, an episode under an hour.
Yep. But yep, thank you everybody for listening. My name's Dusty.
And I'm Daniel.
and we'll see you guys next time.
Take care.